I asked you to write down what you believe composition is based on what you know so far, and these are the responses that we had received. Is there anything that jumps out at anybody? So we have a variety of phrases, a work of literature, narrative prose. Where's the word careful? I like careful, thoughtful choices. So who wrote that? Careful, thoughtful choices. How about that? Okay, so why careful, thoughtful choices?
I think the word composition is a little bit more involved than just simply writing. And so when I think of composition, I think of something like planning and being engaged in your writing rather than just putting things on the page.
Do you know where maybe you picked that up? What are your experiences that would point you to that?
I think both in like English 101 and the kind of like careful process we take to look at writing, and also just like as I've progressed in like this department, my writing is better when I take more time to think about it.
Interesting. And she used the word process as well. Scholars in composition argue over what composition is all the time. There was a process movement, there's a post-process movement. Has anybody taken a composition class where you had to do work over and over, like the same story over and over again, like edits? So there are universities where pretty much what you would do in a composition class is write the same stories over and over until you finally put together a portfolio, and that would be your final attempt. Some classes you might just write the story one time and you get your grade. Who said a work of literature? Why a work of literature?
That's like, I said that a composition is a work of literature that someone has composed. I guess I took that like she said.
Okay, so a lot of these I think are pointing that way, that we're doing this on purpose. We're doing this more than one time. We're crafting our word choices on purpose. We're crafting our phrases, our paragraphs, our stories. Does that mean before composition, what were we doing?
Was that a rough draft, like the composition like your basically done?
Okay. I was a high school dropout who could not write paragraphs. So I wanted to write an RPG game and I tried to write the whole thing in dialogue. Imagine looking at that. But I was so afraid to try to write because I had learned I was not a good writer in high school. So composition taught me I can write paragraphs, and sometimes I need to. If you took your 101 here, you learned a genre, and then every genre demands something different. You're not going to do an RPG script all in dialogue. Like, what does the world map look like? What do the towns look like? That can't be dialogue. What is one? Somebody point one out for me. Something that jumps out at you.
Creating something?
Creating something. So who is that? What did you mean by that?
Well, when I was thinking about it, I was thinking of composing, like making music or any piece of writing. So it's like the process of creating.
Okay. Do you think it's more, does it have to be intentional, or what are your thoughts on what is this something you're creating? Is it intentional? Where does it start? Does it start when you start writing? Does it start before it?
I would think it would be intentional when you start.
Okay. I wonder how different creative writing is from composition. Like, how would you define creative writing then differently than composition? Yes.
I feel like creative writing is more like sporadic.
Okay.
Like you do it while you're in the moment, or you do it like I've taken creative writing classes here versus taking like an advanced composition class,
Okay.
or like English 100 or African American literature, where you're taking the time before, like it's an intentional creation. Where in like creative writing, you just kind of do it while you're in the moment, and then whatever happens happens.
That is a great answer, and a very curious one, since in this class this semester, which is advanced composition, we are doing life writing. So what happens when creative writing and composition spill over and overlap into one another? That is what we are trying to figure out this semester. Okay, so now we have read Lynn Bloom, what she says about academic writing versus life writing. I've asked you the question of what is composition from a life writing point of view. Some of these words jump out at me immediately. Number one, I don't remember, were there any one-word answers in our first group? I don't think there was, but here you got several. Nice. Okay, so who wrote the word raw? Okay, so why'd you write that?
Because I feel like she was trying to say that it should be like an honest telling of the story. Like you take your life experiences and then you compose it well. So So it's like the thoughtfulness of like what we were talking about from the beginning, combined with like your like personal, intimate, like, raw feelings.
So we're already questioning what we were saying a few minutes ago because everything was, oh, composition's so careful, it's so plotted, it's so purposeful. Can something be purposeful and plotted and be raw at the same time? Don't those contradict each other? Let me tell you something. You're not telling the truth in your life until your life contradicts itself. Life is full of paradoxes. You can write something that is raw and personal, but is also something that you also labor over, something that you do until you get it to where you want it to be. Intimacy, who wrote that? Okay.
I think about like personal novels written about their own lives and how it's like I'm letting you into my life, into my story. Like this is so personal to me that I'm willing to share it with you so you can have the same feelings that I have.
Everything we read will be authors being vulnerable. And I want you to think about that. What does it mean that I'm going to be vulnerable? I'm going to put my name on something as nonfiction, as life writing, and I want to do it bad enough, or I need to do it bad enough, that despite being vulnerable, I'm still going to put that out there. What is that human need, and why do we do it? Which attaches here nicely. Who wrote this? Okay, like you.
Because nobody really wants to read something where it's like, and then this happened, and then this happened. Like, if somebody's going to read a life writing composition, they want to be able to relate to it. They want to be able to see the author's life. Like, that's kind of the point of it.
All life writing is relational. There were lies told, and that's a harsh way to say it, but lies told, I think, in composition for a long time about if you're doing personal writing, if you're doing life writing, then it's isolated, it's individual, nobody can relate to it. That's not true. Life writing is relational. It might not be my exact life, but I'll tell you a quick story. So, a writer who we'll talk about later in this semester, she has cancer, and they give her a prosthetic to wear, and she chooses not to wear it. And she's comfortable like that. But when she goes into the doctor, the nurse is like, you're not wearing the prosthetic we gave you. She's like, doesn't make me comfortable. And then the nurse tells her, it makes us uncomfortable when you're not wearing it when we gave it to you. And she was so shocked by that reaction that she couldn't say anything. But she later put it into writing so that other people who read that, whether they're in that situation or a completely different one where they would be silent, would have an opportunity to speak up because they would remember that story. So a personal story does not have to be a one-to-one exchange with our exact life for it to hit something in us. Maybe why life writers make people mad is because if life writing is human, then what is not life writing? You don't have to answer that. Okay, so I think, I really like this one, attached, influence from writers' personal experiences. Who wrote that? Okay, so why that?
I think there was a larger, it was more focused on, I guess, the writer's point of view.
Okay. Objective study. So I interviewed people, or I coded something, and I didn't use the word I, and the language is really boring, so it's like an official study. That is still coming from someone's bias. What questions did they ask? What questions did they not ask? You know, what are they emphasizing in their writing? What are they leaving out? Everything comes with a bias. I am clearly speaking to you from a life writing bias. Lynn Bloom was speaking to you from a life writing bias. In other classes, you will experience composition another way. There are more than one way to experience a subject. But in this class, we will dive deeper into what is composition from a life writing point of view. We will reject some of the things that have been said. We will reject a binary between creative writing and composition, and we will figure out what it means to compose in composition, but to be vulnerable and do life writing. This is day one. We will do more stuff next week. I will talk to you about a living composition, which is a term I created that in my classes, in the writing, I don't separate you, the writer, you, the student, from you, the human being. I think what you write should change your life outside of this class, and I think what you do outside the class should change what you write. So this is just our first lesson. We will come back to these terms as the semester goes on, but right now I just want you to think about these two ideas.